Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the second edition of Pedia Online Poetry Festival, organized by Ideas in Progress in association with Padasala and Cambazine, titled Polyphony of Global Voices, Readings of Poets in Praxis. Thank you all for being here. My name is Deepak and I'm the presenter of today's session. Pedia Online Poetry Festival, POP Festival, is an attempt to explore the versification practice of English poets of the day. In the 7 sessions in the second edition of the event, we have 7 poets in focus who shall be listened to, and we have young scholars and faculties joining us who shall carry the conversation with those in focus. At the outset, let me introduce the 3 organizations that have come together to make this event possible: Ideas in Progress, Padasala, and Cambazine. Ideas in Progress, an organization that had been engaging with the society for over the past 20 years, helps to bring about spontaneity in expression by kindling the aesthetic sensibility within through a creative process. They open up opportunities to engage with artists from various fields, including poets, musicians, painters, sculptors, film and theater enthusiasts, to share, nurture, guide, and motivate creative engagement. It thereby attempts to fill the ideological vacuum by spurring original thought in a critical endeavor. In collaboration, we have with us Padasala, which is an informal collective of friends at Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, which was formed in 2015 to inspire, engage, and involve the academia with the society, thereby trying to bridge the gap formed due to differences of varied kinds. Our focus is on academic engagement, and therefore our target is creating brighter minds. Yet another collaborator is Cambazine.com, which is an independent, bilingual online platform for connecting campus to the community. It helps students and educators by providing the latest news, resources, and reports on university matters, assists learners in forming collaborative alliances, and provides a valuable resource bank for the exchange of information, ideas, and best practices in academia. Now let me introduce the curator and the chair of today's session, Mr. Chandramohan. Mr. Chandramohan S is an Indian English Dalit poet and literary critic based in Trivandrum, Kerala. Warscape Verses, published in 2014, was his first collection of poems. Letters to Nandio Dancil is his latest collection. A shortlist for Srinivas Roy Poetry Prize 2016 and a fellowship at the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa in 2018 are some of his most notable accolades. I take this opportunity to thank him for having made this event possible, and I welcome you, sir, to chair and interact with the poet in focus, unfurling his poetic journey, its philosophy, politics, and method to us. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping guidelines for this webinar. The poet in focus will first read out his poem, and then the chair shall engage in a conversation with him. While they are in conversation, participants can ask questions using the chat feature of Zoom. May we also request you to maintain your audio and videos on mute until or unless asked to unmute. On behalf of Ideas in Progress, Padasala, and Cambazine, may I thank you all once again for joining us today. I request all participants online to join the WhatsApp group, the link to which will be shared with you over the chat box very soon. We look forward to your participation in this and future sessions organized by us. Now, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce and welcome the poet in focus, Khal Torabully. Mr. Khal Torabully is a Mauritian poet, essayist, film director, and semiologist. His PhD thesis was on semiology of poetics. Author of some 25 books, he coined the term coolitude to give voice to indentured workers, imbuing the term with dignity and pride. Torabully's linguistic acrobatics, wordplay, as well as neologisms serve to heighten the seriousness of his themes. He has been hailed as the greatest poet of Creolite, has over 20 published collections of poetry, and has also published several essays and articles in respected international journals. He's also a filmmaker with a couple of films to his credit, and he has picked up a couple of movie awards, notable among which is Best Director for a short feature at the Zanzibar International Film Festival in 1998. Sir, we are indeed honored to have you with us in this event as a poet in focus at this inaugural session of Season 2 of this Festival of Poems. Thank you for joining us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm greatly honored and pleased to be with you, connecting with the magic of internet, the place where I'm now, France and Kerala and India and abroad. Well, basically, I am a writer of French language, in French language, but I also write in Creole, which is my native tongue, from the island of Mauritius, and English. This, I am maybe, you were speaking about polyphony in your festival, which is a very good idea, because I am a kind of polyphonic poet. I live between languages, between imaginaries, memories, and histories. And that is why, in the way I envisage and write history, poetry, I do it through a transoceanic perspective. I envision history as a sharing of the imaginaries, of the unsaid, of the voiceless people, which inspired me into writing about coolitude, a term I coined by giving humanism to people who were left aside, marginalized in history. And this enabled, I think, academia to give enhanced interest to these downcast of history, downtrodden people. And this has become a discipline nowadays. But what is interesting, I think, in the way I approach this memory and history is I did it through poetics, poetry, and poetology. But we will come to these terms later. I was telling my good friend Chandramohan that today my reading is dedicated to the memory of Mahenu Channa, who was the ex-chairman of the Apravasi Ghat, which is a World Heritage Site in Mauritius, dedicated to the memory of Indenture, coolie trade. And he was also the president of Global Gupio. And Mahen and myself have been working for years together. He passed away a few days ago. So this session for me will be in remembrance of Mahenu Channa. I'm going to read mostly from this book, Voices from the Apravasi Ghat, that was published in 2013 by the Apravasi Ghat Trust Fund. And it was indeed the first poetry book they published. And I was very honored to have two forewords in this book. The first by His Excellency President Puriak, President of the Republic of Mauritius, ex-president, and Mahenu Channa, who was the chairman of the Apravasi Ghat. I will read an excerpt from his foreword, but before I would like to read an epigraph, which I like to use epigraph as a kind of polyphony in my books. Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness. They had between them, to my mind, the terrific suggestiveness of words heard in dreams, of phrases spoken in nightmares. So I'm going to read this excerpt from Mahen's foreword. He's quoting Earl Burney, another epigraph. The essentials of poetry are rhythm, dance, and the human voice. I'm reading from Mahen. The beauty of the prose and poetry that you will experience while going through the lines of voices from the Apravasi Ghat shall definitely fill you with the fragrance of the seas and yet equally mystify you, dear reader. The deconstruction from your side will beautify, refine, and clarify your comprehension of the indentured history. And from there, you will realize the outstanding universal value, the significant cultural treasure, and the global historic magnitude of the Apravasi Ghat as a major point of passage of this variegated migration. Indeed, the experiences of our forebears in the process of influencing the world economic design and the cultural anthropology of this globe are captured very vividly here. Thank you very much, Mahen. Rest in peace. I know these words will resonate with you. I will go on with another epigraph, this time from V.S. Naipaul. The world outside existed in a kind of darkness, and we inquired about nothing. Depot life. Here is my deposed life. Prospected vagrant, prospective migrant. I was dispossessed and processed as a woman child after slaves slammed. My labor was love lost, as dead dodo my poo dosed. Sailed at my own coast to be guest and musafir host. Hey woman, give me pani, pan, roti, and kala si. Deep, deep in me, behind me, I can hear the tear and the pee, the shrill fear of Senegalese and Chinese coolie. Like them, as Pooh rose, I arose, spitting on this country, saying, it is so ugly, like our migrant's journey. I am woman deposed in the depot of Dobbies, in a ghat of coolies. The plantation was lost cause. All Caribbean poets and prose told me of Mauritius, Fiji, Jahajis. Kala, give me pani kala. From Calcutta, before Baitka and Madrasa. Make my dal masala in Guadeloupe, Trinidad, Guyana. Yes, Jahaji, Mauritian mixed with chili, papad, and dal puri. See, I want more mango chutney, then jalebi, and red rose aluda. No dark waters to drink, but clear waters to think. Yes, Jahaji Trinidadian flavor with more chili. Blissful curry from Réunion with vanilla. Some roti for Yoghataji. Who wants to blink for a woman at the depot? Oh, cook the curry and dal pita mangela. On the ship to Trinidad, on Fort El Razak, was Abdul Razak, my dad, to be born in Trinidad. As simple as that. 4 months from port to report. Like them, from Goree, Zanzibar, and Madagascar, from ports of Macau and China, from Calcutta, and Calcutta. Keep on track, plow the sea with virtuous keel. They sold children for some rupiahs, would not eat for days, letting death eat them bowels. Strange those nostalgic souls leaning on the brink of abyssal memory. They were promised milk and honey, and they say the taste is bitter, bitter like sugar. Dreadful voyage. Under such circumstances, women fell down the hatch. I died many times as I was ashamed. Who survives her own sharam? Shame and shared sharam. Dreadful Dr. Crew knew you, but the sea tricked you, like our conscience before their weep. All the slaves free to be captured to heavens of unpromised lands. Yes, Sahib. Yes, Sahib. Free will is conditional necessity. Coolies and slaves have been saved from themselves by jumping in these holes. Remember famine and Sipai revolt? So many came not kidnapped but decoyed. Then after comes the truth of Kalapani, the truth of destiny. Why warm clothes in damp nights? Is the gut right here or already under our feet? Then Sahib spoke strange fictional English. Economic loss minus mortality, morbidity and serendipity. Why so much stupidity when caught red-handed? Women rare as gold, women who survived are diamonds in the last mine of the Queen of Saba. There is no indentured freer than a slave, and below the coolie is an indentured behen. Oh, pity me, brethren, O Lord in heaven. The fakir's imbalance and permanent negotiation show a hybrid posture in post-colonial visions. Then came from an army of defeated sepoys a fakir, as lean as the moon is high. He rose his voice to carve his sigh, and told old pariahs of the sea their plight. Whatever you think is your right, you must defend. Your star must remain bright. But allow me to give you a piece of advice. You are sailing in a world of lies and vice. I am the man of imbalance and plasticity. In me, the gestures of the ocean are free. I may stand on my elbow or on my knee. Whatever is in the world must flow easily. I am the fakir of Bangalore. I have connections galore. My network is beyond boundaries and imaginaries. I compute, I dispute, and I refute words from distant cultures and of great repute. I have a binary net in my mosaic head. I am lean. Don't think I am transparent. I am the opacity of people who are conversant with the idioms of corals and currents. I have known the amber and enjoyed the curry of Surat and Muscat. My poems are delicate as the flimsy rubaiyat. I have kept the beauty of the rose and have perfumed words with a cause. Life on the Kalapani can also be the voyage to ultimate reality. Keep crossing Jahadi, keep steering the Akuli. Life is a ceaseless journey from your broken dream to a new day. Sometimes the sea is sweet like a bulbul. Sometimes it breaks the metal and the marble. Keep sailing to Mirisdesh and Tapu Kalen. The heart is where one's feelings reign. Keep your feet on the waves and the furrows. Sow whatever is left in your vows. On the land, patience meets sorrows. Keep crossing the Kalapani, Paria, Fakir, Sadhu, or noble Kuli. We are wise enough to keep misery from the land of atavistic poetry. I defend the fakir's aesthetics. In Arabic, they call me the half-naked Pooh. In Sufism, they praise my bare ethics. Some say I demean and demure. Some say I dream on a bed of nails. No gesture that is in between fails to remind you of the coral that flows in my bones, my spirit, rooting my toes to the infinite shapes of poetry and prose. Where is the meditation? Where is the pose? A fakir was always beyond borders, lifting his pains over endless splinters. I was here and there, raised in levitation, praised in all forms of renunciation, feared as I have always been beyond categorizations. Where is the touching key? Where is the moving key? What is more primitive than history? The fakir's aesthetics curbs any memory. The literate is illiterate with our voices. His discourse stumbles as we articulate that his English book mumbles something strange. Words of the coolie always sift treatise of the master, chini chale, like brown and white sugar. Inadequacy is emphasized in dissimilarity. It is precisely where speech, la parole, discourse, matters the real, is the seal, and the breach, matters discourse, is case, staged by a fakir and a drôle. The idiom of an idiot is always monolingual. What is obvious dies in the ludicrous. I heard Elizabethan rhetoric, pastiche and parody in signs of discontinuity. I called the troubadour my kawali, saying, "Fit my structure, sir. I refuse the system of your meter. I shun the length of rhyme and your nature. Literature is my new venture. But must I know the name of the briar in the noble land of Wiltshire? To move from the barracoon of the nigger to the voice beyond the fakir's murmur? What is a fakir's in identity in a homogeneous society? Am I the sin of fluidity or a symbol of heterogeneity? I read my Vodafone and smell the binary. I am at work here and there as a progeny of synesthesia in a new century. As a choral, I recall, I recoil. I recall the accumulation of poses and causes. I agglutinize. I agglomerate like the igloo, cold outside, hot in my habitat. I lace, I trace, and replace the currents of Kalapani with the red and indigo sea. I, me, you, we. Where is the subject's post-colonial enigma? Don't tell me to let you go, dear Oedipus. Listen to my identity that seems so ubuesque. I talk, I toil, I empty the sea. I furl, I well, I trace complexity. I meditate modernity. I weave, I wave, I one sample identity. I play, I create opacity. I net, I cheat, I chat on simple purity. I pass, I trespass on singular memory. I attach, I detach and copy vernacular history. I lie, I tie, I'm stoop in mortality. I try, I retrieve, I believe in the immobility of fluidity. I am the spam of neat archives of memory. Even if I say only Asian They say fakir is Chinese. Oh, how many Indies are there in me? India is an idea a nomadic fakir has when dizzy over the waves of migration. A passage to India is another middle passage. In diaspora, in diaspora already, before the waves cut through Cosmopolitan. No buyer, Desi, Jahaji on internet, we sail, lost, connected, interacting between the idea of proper culture, age of XI, age of exiles. Can I live in a web? I, like spider, 1 foot, 1 leg, 3, 2, 4, hopping between borders through nets and nest, images and words floating to me without delay. All of us fakir identities, indented identities, crossing from Hollywood to Bollywood and Collywood. In dark space, the fractal melody of the sitar grounds horror with solid gold. Kalapani, Kalapani, oh Kalapani. All memories processed and saved when the analyst returns to the Silicon Valley of Bangalore. Save the fakirs stretched between the fears and laughter of more virtual programs. He smiles with grey matter of the brown people, building virtual computer lands. Typing magnificence of fear in personal experience, not mere snobbery of the Desi, wondering if civilization is worth scrutiny. Homi Baba, with false teeth, fascinated with the working class that has lost work in the global flow of rupiahs, musing over the weight of the bed, of the sleepless debtor, hum the wake also with honor, to crown new behavior of masses through tailorized speculation. Kalapani, Kuli Kalapani, moving across borders and cash flow from Varanasi to Karachi and the immemorial ways of life along the spice route also. And they bring computers to Cinnamon Alley. I will read 3 last poems. Bacha, each revolution has its themes. Human nature is such, opaque like a thirsty soul set to rush to the London city and Wall Street, composing the solution of all spheres. Again, India is on the route. First with Columbus and Vasco da Gama, now on the information highway with Bill Gates and more tycoons, is spreading virtual pariahs across the overcrowded barracoons. The fakir has a particular organization of geometry. His body is a composite sign. None of his gestures is benign. Beware of those who reduce his body to its sheer border of skin, race, and poverty. Last one. My presence overlooked impersonality, now loaded with big hardware and magic software, transformed in so many middle passages without a sigh, without an ocean, mind twisted like the fakir, looking beyond anonymity, a shade, a mythical shade on the wall, on the screen, on the sea. Oh, Kalapani, Kalapani. Oh, Kalapani. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Khal Torabully. So I'm like the poems are so evocative, and I'm like out of words. So like at the beginning, I'd like to post that question which I've sent you in the Zoom link. So primarily you're identified as a French poet, right? Is that true? You've chosen
Yes,
French as your language for poetry, or was it easier?
just like this fakir I mentioned, I am across linguistic borders.
So and also
But
since
basically, I'm French. I am French, Francophone and French poet, because most of my books have been written in French. But my next book is going to be in English. And now, some of my books are being translated in English. The next one, I have not read poems from my very first book, which is Cargo Hold of Stars, which is going to be published in the United States this year, translated by Nancy Carlson, and I hope available in India as well. It is already an ebook.
Yeah. We can try towards publication in India if you wish. Yeah. So so my question was like, my extended question is this: so is it similar to the colonial writing, like the empire writing back, or like what are the popular misconceptions about the French language? So poetry enthusiasts worldwide would be astonished. They could be astonished to know that negritude has its origins in the French language. So negritude, which has been universally canonized. So MSSR is a household name among a lot of poetry enthusiasts. So they have their origins in French, not in English. So so these are like, I believe, for a reader. So those of us who are poets here, probably you could throw us some sprinklings of what it means to write in French, or being a Mauritian. So where French is accessible only to the elites, like English language in India, etc. Anything, any thoughts? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, this question of language is central. As a poet, you know that the choice of language is not innocent, because I've been writing from the global south. But what type of global south? Because both in this global south, we write in the former master's language. But then in the first book, Cargo Hold of a Star, I mentioned earlier, I wrote that I mix all the languages I've heard: Bhojpuri, Hindi, Urdu, Farsi, French, Creole, Spanish, whatever. We have 12 languages in Mauritius, at least, Chinese also, Hakka, Mandarin, and so on. This forms a kind of polyphonic music. I'm coming to this term again, because this is a focus of your festival. All these languages mix in my mind, my imaginary, my inspiration, and gives me poetry. I wrote that my native language is not English, French, Creole, or Bhojpuri, or Hindi, or Urdu. It is poetry. My native language is poetry. When I write, I am like this fakir in levitation. I take structures, paratax, images, the linguistic genius of all these idioms, languages. This is why I say only an idiot in my language, in my perspective, is monolingual. I mean, we have.
Yeah, I've copy pasted that in the WhatsApp chat. That's a profound line from your poem.
Yeah. Yeah. So you see, okay, historic hazard has made it that I write in French or English, but my very first poetry book, which was published in France by University Lyonnais, was in English, which is very strange, because as a young man, I wrote in English and French also. But when I came to France for my studies, I was, bathing in French language almost every day. And I like French language. It's a beautiful language. But what type of French language? I do not write. I can write, of course, standard or academic French. I am a linguist, basically, But I try each and every time to make, the French have a word for this, la langue, that is the idiom, to make of my idiom a language. This is what every poet does. you make from your langue, in French, your idiom, a language. That is, a new organization of sounds, rhythm, meanings, polyphony, polysemy, and all this. And in this direction of going beyond categorizations and borders, I also addressed my voiceless history. We're speaking about coolitude as a French word. I'm coming to this. I said, why is my history voiceless? I was celebrating the bicentenary of the French Revolution in France, and I said, where is my narrative? You see, something was missing about myself. And then I started thinking about something that could bring my history back. And I devised this humanism of diversity, of coolitude. Is springing from the word coolie, which has been viled, made voiceless. And even, I think, mainstream Indian historiography was a bit, diffident with this kind of indentured history. And I tried to bring it to the forefront, and this was something that had to be innovative, I am not basically a historian, because even if I studied political science, I wanted to approach history through the archives, the silence of the archives, but through a transoceanic perspective. That's why I speak about the corals and the fluidity of the sea, so that we can become creative with this maritime history itself, because in the past, as a kid, I used to learn Britannia rules the waves. I say, why can't we rule the waves ourselves? Because we have a long maritime history as well. The Indian subcontinent, people from the Indian Ocean. It is the oldest ocean of humanity in terms of connections, trade connections and so on. We are the first ocean of globalization, so we can tell our own history. That's why my poetry became a poetics, a vision of the world, which is encapsulated in the word coolitude, which is a complex vision of the world, and poetology, which is the meeting between knowledge, deconstruction of imperial discourse, because as you see in the poems I have read, I deconstruct post-colonial discourse, postmodern discourse with a ironical tinge, I'm playing with these words, I quote Baba, I could have quoted Spivak and so on, deconstruction in a way, by getting to this kind of bodily posture of the woman who is indentured through coolie voice. I deconstruct the categorization that the coolie or the indentured is only Indian. The indentured person can be Congolese, Malagasy, African, Chinese, European, This makes the diversity. I also remind one that the India is the Indias. It is a mosaic, diverse India. When you change, you go from Bangalore, Kerala, 200 kilometers, you see another kind of religion, language, food, and, So India itself is Corallian India. This is what coolitude is about. This is why also I bring it to focus. I did that 31 years ago when I wrote Cal d'Etoile, Cargo Hold of the Stars. I brought into contact the narrative of the slaves and the indentured persons, which is now the philosophy of the international indentured labor route, and many academic people are now getting into this new discipline which is emerging, but for me it is not new. We have been writing about that for 30 years. And my idea is, I was born in this global south, in the margin of the margin, because what is central to, for example, continental lands like India or China or beyond, can be also, for us, something that marginalizes us. So we have to go into a more fluid kind of narrative, discourse, and also deconstruct what is central in the center of the margins. You see how the idea of addressing linguistic issue, philosophy of writing, history, historiography is a complex ongoing work, and all these blends as all my languages in poetry. But that's a last thing I would like to say about solitude. You mentioned negritude, which was coined by the poet, French poet, Francophone poet, Aimé Césaire, very great poet, because he had to bring into focus the history and civilization of the Black population of the world, and it was during the colonial context. So he had to give like a fist, with a word, saying, we also, we have our values, our civilizations, and so on and so forth. Some people have misunderstood Césaire and later President Senghor, who was a poet, president of the Senegal, saying it is an essentialist vision of the world just meant for the Black people of the earth, But I think negritude is more complex than this. But readily when I met Césaire, I told Césaire, I am not, reclaiming a kind of lost India that is, which has been recomposed on the Kalapani. I am reclaiming the Indies in the historic discourse of Columbus and the discovery of the Americas by discovery between commas by the Europeans, and this is also, they were going to the Indies in any case. They were not going to the Americas. Columbus did not know that existed. So for me, the Indias, the plural India is solitude. This means you are engaging with diversity. And India for me is the Indies, the Indias. You go there, you never reach it. You never reach it. It is a kind of geography of displacement that allows you to go into the choral fluidity and connect with other imaginaries of the world. Sorry, I've been a bit long.
That's great. That's great. So there are a few questions. Maybe Deepak will raise them, from the audience. Yeah.
So one Mr. Yaden from Nagaland asks, if poetry is universal, is poetry better written in complicated vocabulary or in the everyday language? I think the question comes from the context that he read about you being a poet who's good with neologisms. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a very interesting question. I write poetry also in everyday language. I think a poet has different registers. We call it registre in France, no? Different, let's say, polyphonies. And this book is a kind of intertextual book. It's why I started with epigraphs, of Naipaul, Joseph Conrad, and so on. Because I was deconstructing deconstructive discourses. And the preface, the foreword, mentions this, that it is going to, you have to do the deconstruction of the deconstruction in a way, because this also shows the distance I try to strike with what I'm writing and the discourse that are flourishing, about, hybrid discourse, postmodern, transmodern, whatever ideas. But then this is a singular type of poetry. Of course, when I write about the beauty of the world, about traveling, about the gardens, I like gardens a lot, about flowers, I use the vocabulary that comes in my inspiration. I do not force my inspiration. If it has to be a kind of, let's say, contrived, kind of poetry, it serves a purpose, The whole book I give hints that I'm in a way being ironical, joking, speaking about the daisies who have become cyber coolies. Nowadays, the voyage continues different forms, tailorization and so on. These are words I normally do not use in poetry. But so I hope I have answered the question. It depends on what you're writing about and the inspiration you get. And I never, limit myself to a particular, because I believe each time you write a new poetry book, you're inventing another language. This is my creed.
So in this context, there is another question from Alina. She asked, what is the role of critic? This is a very general question. What is the role of critic in analyzing the literary quality of the poet?
I think
that's good. I like to add something, dear sir. So you have some time, I'll add something. So people generally say that the Caribbean poetry in English is very good because the literary criticism surrounded around the poetry is extremely good. So that's the reason why the poetry is good. That is, they have an ecosystem that critiques their writing. So look at the journals like the Caribbean Quarterly, or look at many the West Indies based journals. Look at the kind of book reviews they have. It is these kind of criticisms that trigger good poetry, quote unquote good poetry. So people say that Indian English poetry lacks this. That's the reason why we haven't produced work of that that level of acclaim. Would you like to respond to that? Firstly, her question, maybe. Yeah.
Good question. Very, very, very interesting question. Now, I will start with the first question by Alina. I think, did I hear correctly the name? Okay. I think the role of poetry, of the critic in analyzing, let's say, poetry, is essential in the linguistic frame, and also by connecting the humanities, human sciences with poetry. I mentioned the word poetology before. Poetry doesn't mean you cut yourself from knowledge. It is another form of knowledge, maybe for me, the superior form of knowledge, because you see how many things we can bring together, from the inside, from the outside, from the other side of the world. So this is the freedom we have in our linguistic, let's say, ingenuity. So I read what people write about my poem. Sometimes I discover ideas that was secondary, that was secondary in my writing. And this is brought, into focus. So this allows you also to read your poetry in a way, but from a distanced angle. But basically, I think it was Alistair MacNeice who said, poetry should not mean, but be, I would say yes, but also poetry must mean. Because nowadays, for example, we have so many possibilities of linking text, languages, discourses, that if poetry would be totally ignorant, this is impossible. We also have to, because intertextuality is as old as humanity. I was reading a book about intertextuality. There was a script, from ancient Egypt saying, oh, why wasn't it born at the type of Kekeren-Perenseb who could write the aurora with the fingertips of wine, But that was 100,000, not 100,000, but some thousand years ago. Almost everything has been written. We rearrange with the words of others. So I like to read critical. Lately, just 2 days ago, a lady, I will not mention her name, from Canada wrote to me. She made a critique of this book, which is going to be in the Indian Ocean Journal. That will be interesting for you, Chandramohan. And this lady was very, very good at reading what was between the lines, because I write in a polysemic way. Of course, you can read on different levels. This is the freedom of the reader as well. You can read at different levels, but then as basically I like to play, on words, with words and so on, you can go to another level. So this is part of what I like, and I think you can read the poetry without the critique, but I don't think you can read the critique without reading the poetry. You see, there is a kind of precedence that comes, in the reading process. To come back to the question of Chandramohan, this is a very, very sharp observation you made, because when I was writing, I first wrote about this book, Cargo Hold of the Stars, which is the foundation of Indenture studies, because nobody was writing about that 31 years ago. I also wrote in the Caribbean, a Mauritian guy living in France, going to the Caribbean. I was invited there. There was a series of conferences there with the Indo-Guadeloupean Association. This is where I met him in Césaire. And after meeting Césaire, I said, I have to write a book of Caribbean coolitude. And I wrote the book, which got the International Island Poetry Prize, which is a very good prize given by the French poets. And this book is the Caribbean Mauritian book. And of course, coming to the critique, there is a fantastic pool of intellectuals in the Caribbean that is now coming into life in the Indian Ocean area. And why did I write in this transoceanic archipelago of fragments? Because I wrote in a metonymic way, because my history is not complete. I connect, like writing of the tessera, of the fragments. I said part of the fragment of my memory and history, which creates a pan-indenturism. All these histories are linked through the coolie trade. I wrote there, feeling what was in the Caribbean. And I could give a historic explanation of this. Haiti, with Toussaint Louverture, made the first revolution, let's say, of the subaltern, of the person dominated. And they made the first Black Republic, and the Constitution of Haiti, which is for me the first literary text of freedom, was written in Creole, my native language, the Constitution of Haiti, you see. So that liberated a political consciousness, the awareness of your situation in the Caribbean, let's say, area, but also beyond, because Central America is not far, South America is not far, United States not far as well. This is a kind of Corallian area where languages, cultures, histories, memories crisscross, We do not have this density, this cultural, semiological density in Mauritius. Even if we are an archipelago, we are related to Réunion Island, which is 200 kilometers far apart. Madagascar is very far. We have the Rodrigue Island and so on. And India is quite far also. Africa is quite far. We are real insular people, islanders, But the Caribbean is, for me, a more archipelagic in the way that things flow. Things are connected. And of course, after this, you had Aimé Césaire there. He invented this, negritude word, which liberated a lot of Black intellectuals in the United States, in Central America, South America, in Africa itself, in Europe, because it had a world impact, So these small islands, I think, I'm speaking to our Indian friends there and Chinese or Europeans as well, do not underestimate what comes from these small islands. We have the capacity of, flowing with the corals, of getting to the roots. Our roots, like the coral's roots, are seated, but open to the currents of the world. It is the symbol of biodiversity, because it is a habitat of 70% of the biomass of the sea. The coral liberates planktons, which is the biggest migration on Earth. You cannot find a fittest metaphor for migration. And it makes polyps, plateaus, you know, all kind of forms and shapes and colors. It's a symbol of a diversity as well. And the coral results from the symbiosis of a zooplankton and a phytoplankton, which are in constant negotiation. When you speak about hybridity and constant negotiation, you have the coral, which is better than the rhizomatic metaphor of Edouard Glissant or people of the Créolité movement, because the rhizome is under the soil. You cannot watch it. It is in its living habitat. So the coral articulates biodiversity and cultural diversity. Because we know, for example, in the Amazon area, if you put away these people living, you know, we call the first people of the earth, they maintain the biodiversity. They like the Mati, the Pachamama. They keep this biodiversity, gives us oxygen as well. You see, they are linked to us because the cultural diversity is there. So Coolitude has given this metaphor of the coral, which says you must have roots, but you must not fossilize on your roots. You must open to the currents and make new plateaus or stalagmites or stalactites, you know. So this idea of critique in the West Indies was very important to me, and it still is important to me, because I connected with people like Edouard Glissant, who is the most famous theorist of the Caribbean, which exchanged with Raphaël Confiant, another theorist from Créolité, you know. I read about Stuart Hill, you know, and all these people. But now what I would like to do through this Coolitude poetics and poetology, that the Atlantic should connect with the Indian Ocean, because we can say broadly, even we have to be more complex in our vision, broadly the Atlantic, the ocean of slavery. Broadly speaking, the Indian Ocean is the ocean of indenture, even if I write in a more complex way about this. And through the international indentured labor route, which contains the philosophy of Coolitude, this is in the preambles of the route, now we have created a methodology for its memories of Atlantic and the of the Indian Ocean to dialogue, and memories of slavery and indenture to dialogue. I was quoting the book of Nira Vikarama Singh, a historian from Sri Lanka, who wrote about slavery in Southeast Asia and particularly in Sri Lanka. She wrote about the passage saying that people who were indentured to escape slavery became indentured people. They said, no, I am indentured. So there are overlappings, crossovers from one categorization, history and memory, to another. And basically these two pages of servitude are not so hermetically separated. So for me, the Caribbean is part of my intellectual landscape, my ethnoscape, and just as the Indian Ocean, and of course, Mosaic India. Sorry, I developed my answers a bit too long for you.
That's fine, sir. So
there are a couple of questions Deepak may want to raise, because
I have full. No worry.
RT Tiku had already asked this question, but then I think you have partly answered it. Can we relate indentured workers with the slave narratives? So that was what she wanted to know. But then I think you have very clearly explained it. Now, in connection to the question that was already raised by Alina, she wants a little more of clarification. There is a vacuum of critical aesthetics to enjoy poetry in its true sense in this postmodern world. This is an observation that she has made. What is your take on it?
Mm-hmm. Let me allow, there are two parts in the question. This articulation, I call it, I use the word articulation, between slavery and coolie narratives is there. I mean, from a historic perspective, the first marooned slaves on Mauritius were of Indian origin. I mean, we have to go over beyond ethnic representations of who was slave, who was indentured, you see? And historically, this is what is contained in the preambles of the International Indentured Labor Route, that slave route and coolie route have to dialogue, to enter in a dialogue. Because, I mean, in a generic way, when slavery was abolished, there were many abolitions, let's say, when slavery was abolished, coolie trade came. So the matrix of indenture, it did not come from planet Mars, you know. It was in an economic system, which thought of the other, the subaltern, as fit for servitude, even if it was improved servitude. But then, as you would see, I've written in French, but now this is translated in English. There's a book to be published this year in UK. I say the basic comparative, let's say, typologies of slavery and indenture is, first, the slave made a one-way voyage. He was not able to board the ship to come back. And this affects his psyche about where he was going and what his identity is going to be. Theoretically, the indentured person had a 5-year contract and was able to come back. There's a virtual return journey. This is very important in the cosmology, cosmogony, or whatever, of these two servants or slaves, ameliorated slavery in indenture. The contract tells it all. This is the basis of the methodology we've been writing about. The coolie went with a 5-year or 7-year contract, or 3-year, it depends. His name was signed, or her name was signed, or he or she put the fingerprint, which is a semiotic mark of his habeas corpus. He had a body, which gave him or her legal status. The slave was an object. In the slave code of Colbert, that made the legislation of slavery, the slave did not have a name. He or she was an object. You could pass it over to your heirs as a piece of furniture. So this entry into humanity through the contract and the signature of the contract means that it is not the same as slavery, I mean, in coolie trade. But we must not forget the sociology of plantation, railway lines, mines, heavier plantations, rubber plantations, and so on. The persons who were hiring the indentured people, they were slave traders and slave owners. They treated them as slaves in many cases. But something that is also a big difference with slavery is people of coolie trade could write petitions. This is, a slave could not write petition. You know, he was bought or she was bought and sold, you know. Coolie had this habeas corpus. So he or she, even if the local governments, administration, you know, they were very bad with the coolie rights and so on, but there were royal commissions. Gandhi was a champion of the coolie. He was a lawyer. You see the relation between the law, because the contract enacted this possibility that I have a contract, you are not respecting it, I can take it to court, or at least a royal commission. And the coolie trade is there have been a lot of royal commissions. You have many coolie champions going to court, challenging the treatment, you know. In slavery, okay, from time to time you have trials, but there was not a document to say you challenge the ill treatment of of the coolies and so on and so forth. So, but there are more differences. For example, I would say the coolie or indentured person, call it whichever. Coolie is the historic word. Huh? The very first coolie is the first indentured person. This, you cannot erase this word, whether you like it or heard by it. It is scientific. When they came to Mauritius, they were put in the margin of the creolization process. Because, let's say, basically the slave owner and the liberated, emancipated slave, they were in a creolization process in a binary way. The brown presence, the third presence came, but was very enigmatic and thrown outside this creolization process. So there has been a kind of very painful interacting process cultures, and this is where Kulichit comes to fill a gap in transmodern, postmodern, post-colonial discourse and even creolization discourse, putting the Indian presences as an equal entity in the process of interacting between imaginaries, histories, and cultures. This was missing earlier. So I would say the coolie was writing the land, the Mati. That was his writing. Because he has books. He came with the Mahabharata, the Quran, the religious books, all copied. We have this in the Coolie Museum in Mauritius. He came with texts. Some slaves came with the text. They came with plants. They came with musical instruments. There was some culture that made, through the voyage, But slavery, you were just changed most of the times and then put in the hold and sold, So the coolie at the time, because he or she challenged the law, was a person of the signified, to speak in linguistic terms, and the descendant of the slave, or the Creole, broadly speaking, is an inhabitant of the signifier, because he invented language, Creole language, basically, and wrote poetry and literature. Only my generation in Mauritius, okay, there were a few before, of course, took pains to come to the forefront and elaborating in literature from our history. This is something very interesting to know about in the broader context, So all this is mixed in when you are writing, about poetology. What is said, what is unsaid, what is left to be said, the archives, the silence of the archives, how historiography, mainstream philosophy, academia think of us, and we have to challenge this marginalization that has been on. And even at one point, I have been marginalized in the margins because, I spoke across borders, and people, I think most of the time they like to have set, frames and know where we think, but this is what is creating violence in the world. If we are not able to understand what is the difference, and I don't like the word tolerance, but try to understand why this makes us more violent, less, less rich in a way, because we are not challenging our own creeds, beliefs. Everyone has a piece of truth in the world, no? There is not a nation, a people, or an individual with the set truth, which is, not evolving. The person we were at 10 is not the person we are at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. We ourselves are diverse according to the context of life and what we experience and so on. So we should not be fossilized with culture, with language, even with intellectual discourse from this mainstream, from the center, because we have to challenge colonization of the minds. This is an ongoing process. We have to challenge our own colonization within our own lands, because in a way, this is also an ongoing process. Power has its own logic, its own rationale, its divide and rule. We do not follow, as artists, intellectuals, these kinds. We want a broader humanity because we have so much to share. We have, you see, these technological means. We are talking, people from different lands. Why don't we try to learn a bit from each other? And when you write with all the memories of the world. This is beautiful, And when you eat curry, you eat papadam, you eat chow mein, you eat pizza, you eat whatever food you like to eat because it is good for you. Nobody should tell you don't eat pizza because it is Italian food. So this is stupid, So we have also to challenge from all corners those categorizations because life is flowing. 2/3 of this planet is the sea, the ocean. It keeps flowing. Okay, we are standing on 1/3 and we say, we have to close the doors. So, I mean, this is a lack of ambition of ourselves and how we see ourselves as earthlings. I think we have to imagine ourselves. The Kulitude is about this. That's why I focused on the centrality, oceanic centrality, so that we connect. The sea is our motherland, our heritage. You have a part of the sea, I have a part of the sea. We eat salt every day. 2/3 of our body is liquid, just like the setup of the planet. So we have to go back to these basics. When I write poetry, basically, there is an ocean in me. There is this archipelago of fragments always talking through me, because I can give hundreds of examples in my text. I write about these archipelagos, these fragments, because I don't consider myself as complete. Life is a perpetual voyage, perpetual journey. Each and every day, I hope we can learn a new thing. And this is what keeps us alive and keeps the poetry in us. If a poet said, I have learned everything, I mean, he's going to lose his gift of poetry. This is not possible. You must keep, Diaghilev, who came to France, the royal ballet the ballet of Russia. There was this French surrealist writer. He's so famous. So, the Pope of surrealism, I will tell you his name later. He said, astonish me. In French, étonne-moi. If we are astonished with a word, with a silence between two words, because poetry is just like music, the organization of silence between two words or two notes of music. If you are astonished, this touches your body, because I'm not only a mind kind of, intellectual poet. I like to have my skin, my body touch with the rhythm, the rhyme, and the beauty of the poem. And I try to get a balance between these two elements when I'm writing, because too intellectual is dry. It's not good. You must connect with something which is sensitive, which is the beauty of the language itself, the music of the language. It makes you feel, you come to another dimension of yourself, of language, because basically we are people of signs. We are sign bearers, So why should I close my door to your signs? Let us see how we flow, how we connect, not connect. But this is life. This is the adventure of life. So open the doors.
And thank you.
Yeah,
sir.
that's great. Yeah.
And Pungudali asks, if poetry is written in a bilingual language, we are not able to get an original sense. Is there any solution for that?
You know that tradutore is traditore. Translation is treason, no? But I always admire people who translate poetry, because I think this is the most difficult transcultural, I'm not saying intercultural exercise, because translating, generally speaking, and translating poetry, more especially, is not moving from one dictionary to another dictionary. You're moving from a body to another body. I mean, with the sounds you have, in your memory, the taste, the smell of food, the smell of the rose. Do we smell the rose in the same way from one culture to another? Because we are bearers of science. We are framed by science, by language. Even I think eating our tandoori is cultural. The way we eat it, Listening to music is cultural. It's not so natural. Of course, there are basics. You cannot say it's cultural, but translation is treason. Nancy Carlson, to mention her, who translated this very difficult book to translate. I keep telling her, Nancy, you've been a kind of daredevil, going into this translation, because I will not go into it myself. But so far, we have a very good response in the United States. Of course, when I read the poems, I read something which is different, because the language has its own genius, and you move from one genius to another genius of the language. And sometimes you get the core of the meaning of the music. Very rarely, this is grace. But most of the time, it is a recreation. But I would say with the transition of Nancy Carlson, I can feel, the cosmogony of this poetry, the sounds, the spirit. It is there. But then you cannot expect translation to be the same from one language to another. It is impossible. We know it is an impossible task. We can say it is a rewriting, a reinterpretation, of a poetic world, universe, into another one. But very difficult process. I mean, if you are able to translate poetry from one language to another, you are the best transcultural ambassador of the world. I did that. One of my anthologies was translated in Spain, in Spanish, with the Philology Institute of Granada in Andalusia. Joël Gadali de Desquet and Hilda Thomas were two linguists who headed this work. We spent 1 hour on one word, from French into Spanish. And you know what? At the end, I was suggesting words in Spanish. You see, poetry brings you to another imaginary in the way you would not expect. And they say, you are speaking Spanish now. I was so impregnated, with the souls of the person. This is why I say translating is moving from one body to another, but moving also from one soul to another. Very complex, but beautiful exercise.
Thank you, sir. And we have a participant from Nigeria with a question. Our poems mosaic in nature. I perceive a composite mental picture made from overlapping historical experiences. The post-colonial tone seems to me that you are a right-back poet, sir.
A right-back?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, could not hear. Yes, thank you very much for this question. Hello to Nigeria and the Africas, because there are many diverse Africas. This is what I told him, Césaire. I had just visited Mali before going to meet him. I said I met the Dogon, the Pearl, the Toucouleur. There are different cosmogonies in one country. So why do we speak about Africa? So diverse Africas, please. I would say I go, yes, beyond this kind of post-colonial thought, even if the main proponents of this thought were from the margins, let's say mainstream margin, Indians basically, Edward Said also, then Baba, Homi Baba, Spivak, and others. But also, I think we have to go beyond post-colonial thought, because when you're writing about post-colonial or postmodern thought, What is postmodernism? It is the European intellectuals criticizing European modernity. So we have to evolve our own language. I like better the idea of transmodernism. That is, you have the diversity of postmodern discourses in the global South itself. You know, not taking these paradigms of these people from the North, even if they're the margin of the center. We are the margin of the margin. But we have to evolve a discourse which is our own, let's say, open centers in the plural, you see. So there are good ideas in post-colonialism, of course, in many, kind of deconstruction discourses, taking Foucault, for example, Deleuze, Guattari, the French philosophers, and so on. Very interesting Caribbean counter discourse, very interesting. These are very interesting intellectual landscapes, but this is an ongoing process. I would say I like to be rather in a transmodern way of envisaging creative writing, critical writing, because through the oceanic perspective, you see, this is very important, why I speak about the ocean, we can move from these land-based, terra-centric philosophies to a thalasso, fluid perspective where the ethnic or historiography that are centered can dissolve into, let's say, between commas, lesser histories, memories, narratives, and make them equal. On sea, you feel better that you are equal because there's an element that dominates you. It's the vast sea. Who can question the power of the sea when you are sailing? I am the son of a sailor. My father came from the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Tobago. That's why I have this transoceanic perspective in my mind. My mother came from Bengal. My grandmother came from Bengal, and originally also some people from Southeast Asia. So I have this kind of mix in me. This is in my genes and chromosomes, So post-colonialism is interesting, but we should not limit ourselves to do these elements. We have to go on constructing because, this imperial discourse, you mentioned this term, is still ongoing. Even if Britannia, between commas, do not rule the waves, it may be Americas now or others, because the imperial motive is still here. It is ongoing history, and people are still fighting to get a share of your sea or of your land, this is something we have to refute, to deconstruct, but also with our own, let's say, freedom to think of ourselves as ourselves, But as we know, I like the idea of intertextuality. You have to mention your sources when you are deconstructing, and you cannot just, land on Earth from another planet saying, I take this, I take this, I take this. I mean, language is memory. And you write from memory and you make memory. I mean, this is a kind of interactive process you are in between. You take the past, the present, and the future. This is articulation again. Then this is interesting because it liberated at one point of history, just as Negritude did. At one point of history, liberated in a context, but contexts are evolving and we have to set perhaps new avenues of thoughts and creativities. Both, creativity and thought.
Okay, and there's one question. This is a question that I received from quite many people who are like making initial steps to like writing poems. So they were asking, on one side, you have a theme in place, okay, for the poem that you are about to write. And on the other side, you know a lot of things that you have learned, the technical aspects of a poem. Okay, so the questions that I received were in the line that they were wondering, how do you make a choice of the figure of speech or the other technical aspects like the meter and the rhyme and all that, as you engage in writing a poem. So they, as beginners, they were like very curious to understand how you go about your versification.
Very complex question. Okay, let's start with the, let's say, beginners. I think there are no beginners in poetry. They're all poets. I wish to say that go on with your writing. It is precious. Poetry is something, a kind of freedom that is given to you, and a gift. It is an energy, a beautiful energy. Make something good of it, make yourself happy with it, and go on writing. This is the first, if I'm allowed to give a piece of advice, is like what you do. And then through the process, things are going to come, because writing is what you have read also, what you have thought, the food you have liked or not liked, the girl you have kissed or not kissed, the flower you wanted to see in the garden but it's still open, the color of the sunset. Yesterday it was more beautiful, today a bit less beautiful, but it still inspires you. The beauty of the waves, thousands of ideas and themes. I mean, this is poetry. But then, of course, if we go back to the memory, the longer memory of poetry, most of the sacred text books of earth were written in a poetic form. And this has a reason. You take the Bhagavad Gita, you take the Quran, you take the Bible, the Gospels, the Torah, the Zabur, and all this, they have a poetic form. Why? Well, you know this better than I. It has a mnemonic, characteristic. It allows you to memorize the text. But then from the sacred text, we went to the mnemotechnic, to the agricultural treatises of the past. They were in poetic form, because this enabled you to memorize what time was best to sow. Even now we have this in France. We have small sayings, poetic sayings, what time you have to plant your seeds, not plant your seeds. This is immemorial wisdom that flows into the poetry in a poetic form. So we are connected to a broader memory, our personal history, and this humanity that is speaking through us. And there was a French drama director who said, his name is Antoine Vitesse, we are made of the noises of the others. Constantly, poetry is made of the noises of the others, and also their silences. Then the theme. Sometimes I write with a theme, because as I told you, I said my narrative was missing. This gave me the cargo hold of stars, which is in fact one whole book from beginning to the end, which is one poem, but written in a fragmented form. The Tessera way of writing in fragments. And it took me 2 years. Then you see, I've been rethinking about after. You can read a book from the first page to the last, and from the last page to the first. You have 2 books in one. So you have the first book, which is the book of hybridity. The middle book, the pivotal book, is the book of the voyage. And the third book is the book of departure. So you can start from where you are now and go back in an ontological perspective, or start from a chronological perspective. It is itself a discourse. You see how the poetology comes in, because Western historiography makes you believe that history is linear. It's a smooth line, with dates, chronologies. But in Eastern perspective, History is cyclical. And every day we see that history is cyclical. The pandemic is cyclical history. People have forgotten that we had the yellow fever, we had pandemics in the past and so on. So the memory comes back again. This is a way also of addressing poetry with a memory, writing the silence of the archives, your own archives, and the archives that are there. But then sometimes I write with no theme at all because a word is making noise, here, and I have to put this noise on the paper. Or sometimes I think of writing of something else comes. And this is the most beautiful poem because you are being written by the poem. This is a state of grace. This happens. This is what we may call inspiration. But what is inspiration? Inspiration is a whisper. It's a whisper between silence and a word. This is beautiful. Your muse, some says, I need my muse. It is when you're in a state of soul, of mind, of heart, when you are receptive to the noises of the others, of your own subconscious, to the other in you. This is what French poet Rimbaud said. I is another. Je est un autre. So we have also to talk with ourselves. But then, of course, I started writing first without knowing what was poetry. I felt I had something to say. I think this is the basic thing. If you have something to express, this is the first element. Then I went to make a thesis on T.S. Eliot, Semiology of Poetry of T.S. Eliot, who is a kind of poet who writes in a very sensible and sensitive way. Just like Wordsworth say, poetry is an unpredictable balance, I am quoting from mine, between culture and nature. You're walking on a tightrope between sound, between music and sense and meaning. And I have no formula saying you practice it. Then the metaphor comes as a revelation. Sometimes I fabricate metaphors, but they are not the best one. The best thing to do is to let yourself carried away by being enough conscious so that you can engineer, let's say, the next image, the next rhetorical element that is coming, the play on words, the kind of structure you want to give, your rhythm, your rhyme. But then, of course, practice makes, let's say, perfect between commas, because once you have been, I've been writing for nearly 50 years, more than 50 years, then okay, this is good, this is bad. That very important part of the poem is when you read again the poem, how you refashion it, how you put elements in it, you raise. This is very important. It's like making a film. The editing is the second part of the film. If the editing is bad, this is what you're going to see at the end. No? If the editing is bad, the sound is bad, even if it's the best star, acting, then the film is going to be bad. Then do not hesitate to read, not correct too much, because you do not have to, cut into it too deep, But you must respect basically what poetry is. It is, first of all, music. But what kind of music? For me, it is polyphony, but also semantic polyphony, polysemy. It brings an array of sounds that makes your body feel sensitive to a meaning or an emotion, not only meaning. And opacity, I spoke about opacity, the opaculi. Even if you don't understand, you don't mind. You felt something. You see? So this must flow. And then what your memory carries as polysemy, polyphony of the archives, these two must combine in a way. And of course, I do not choose really, this is going to be polysemy, this is going to be. What I try to be is respect the aesthetics of poetry. I mean, you should not, okay, I write prose poems as well, because I'm with a discursive kind of perspective, but the poem must be music, even if it is a very strange musicality. Deconstructing music is still music. You know, Stravinsky said, why should we always be happy with harmony when disharmony is also part of the music? You see? So these are elements that you can bring inside, but feel that you're connected with yourself, with others, with the beauty of life, and also the pain of life, because this is part of life. And put in words, and let yourselves be written.
Okay, thank you, sir. And there's a question in this context. There's two parts to the question. The first one would be that, why did you opt poetry as a medium for your, as we understand, kind of a political expression? So that's the first part of the question. And the second would be sir, are your poems essentially inspired only by Mauritian Creole and diasporic experiences? Are your versification practices dialogue in nature?
Okay. Regarding, can you repeat the first question, please? The first part.
Yeah. You being very political, why did you opt poetry as your voice, not prose or any other medium?
Yeah. Maybe I'm basically a poet. Of course, I have, like T.S. Eliot, you know, he was a critic and a poet. And he quoted Baudelaire, you know, this great French poet I like very much. He came to Mauritius as well. Baudelaire said a poet can be a critic, but a critic cannot be necessarily a poet. And I like this, the way he put the things, you know, because poetry enables you to go into the depth of language, whether poetry or critical language. Oh, that was for me a fantastic gift. I can read both ways and write both ways. So maybe the other way could have been more difficult. Now, I'm quoting Eliot, I'm quoting Baudelaire, you know, two great poets, you know. And when I wrote about T.S. Eliot, I had that very much in mind, you know. I was reading his poetry and seeing what he wrote about that, you know. And this is poetology, the articulation between knowledge and poetry. And so this, I believe, came naturally to me because I wrote from a very early age. Even in my essays, my teachers told me, I had general paper. I always came out first, sorry to say about this, but I wrote prose, nice prose in French and English. Now coming to the second part of the question, Creole and diasporic, let's say, culture. Do I write exclusively about that? I think the first languages, and I'm not saying language, I heard when I was in the belly, in the womb of my mother, were different languages. These are my maternal languages. My father was English speaking. He came from Trinidad. He spoke Hindi, he spoke Bhojpuri, he spoke Farsi, he spoke Arabic, he spoke Creole. So I suspect he was speaking all these languages to the baby in the womb. And my mother spoke basically Creole, some Urdu, some Bhojpuri, you know, and she was very fond of Bollywood films, you know, the old, you know, Guru Dat and all. So maybe I've heard that also when she went to the movie house, you know. So all this also is part of my genetic poetry, let us say, and this keeps, you know, reverberating in you. Now, of course, something struck me when I was a young man. Where did my parents come from? You know, I cannot say, except for my grandmother from the maternal side, where she is buried. I don't know where my father's father was buried. This is a big mystery to me. So I was saying who I am, where do I come from? I mean, everybody has this question at a moment of life. It happens that I was born in an island where I saw a lot of people, Indian looking like me. Okay, there were Chinese people, people of African origin, European type of people. And I say, why are they there? Well, they're different, you know. In my district, there were, in front of my house, a Protestant temple. As a kid, I used to go and, you know, run, you know. My father did not tell you, don't do this, you know. I went to the Shivala, to the Kovil. I went to the mosque. I went to the church, you know. So if we call this diasporic experience, I will call it a world experience, because I was lucky to have a concentration of worlds in about 1 kilometer perimeter, you know. So I am cognizant with the French, the British, the Indian, the Chinese, you know. Everywhere I travel, I go to look for Indian food, Chinese food, you know. This is part of my differences, the others in me, and which is a big privilege for me, you know. So of course, the word idea we have to revisit as well. I don't like the word diaspora. This is why I framed the word coolitude. I coined the word coolitude. It is more open. It is about the voyage. It is about humanities in plural, because a coolie could be white, black, yellow, brown, whatever. It is a universal experience. So it is a universal diasporic experience, because if you go to the older narratives of mankind, even if you go to the Semitic religions, Adam and Eve were refugees on earth. They were expelled from paradise. They are diasporic people. So it goes back to a very ancient memory. You know, we say that Buddha even was in Sri Lanka, no? So in all our narratives, we have this kind of exile or refugee, you know, people exiled because of their thoughts, of their religions, you know. This is as old as the history of mankind. I don't take it as a particular, that's why I speak about Indias. My India is the diversity of Indias within India, the India that we envisage in Mauritius, because most of the people of Indian origin, we don't have Indians in Mauritius, we have Indo-Mauritians. They speak Creole in everyday life. They eat a kind of dal puri, maybe you will not find here in India. A kind of biryani you will not find here in India. They have a diasporic biryani. You see what I mean? But India, the biryani itself is diasporic meal. It traveled from Iran, Afghanistan. I was in Uzbekistan. I ate pilau, which is a form of biryani. And you have diasporic biryanis everywhere in India. From north to south, it's not the same. In Mauritius, from family to family, we have different types. Just like the curry. Curry itself is a diasporic word. Not invented by, I mean the preparation at least by the British. So we are constantly in diasporic relations, but what makes us unable to see it is that we are focused on our small corner of the world. I like writing in fluidity, I would put it this way. It's stemming from roots, ROOTS, and roots, ROUTS. This homophony is central in my work. So I say I am a person belonging to this earth. I mean, you in India, you don't have 14 ears, 2 noses, or 10, you know, arms. You're just like me. I mean, you go to North Pole, to the South Pole, if people are living there in the South Pole, you will see, okay, the penguins, okay, they are living species, I respect them, but we are the human species. We are one species. The problem of all our violence is we have been writing in a divisive way. We do not think ourselves as humanity. Coolitude is about this. But in the process, I say you are muffling part of my history, which is not fair. Even in the creolization process, if you are not aware in hybridity process, post-colonial discourse, you can muffle my presence. And what is better is I speak about my presence, respecting your presence, and it is better to put it in words myself. You do not say who I am from your perspective, not understanding what my history is. This is why I speak about transmodern discourse. Europe is part of my discourse. It is not the center. India is part of my discourse, as many Indias. But what is central in my discourse is the transoceanic perspective through which I see history, I see poetry, I see literature, I connect with people. I am everywhere at ease on this earth. Sometimes language is a barrier, which makes me sorry. I love the diversity of people, my dear. You see how boring it would be if everywhere we had, I don't know, only Chinese, only Indians, that would be boring, I mean, diversity is part of the genius of life. You see your garden. If you have only one type of flower, one color of the flower, you will be bored. You must see different colors. It is good for your brain. And one small exercise, poetic exercise I do every day is to watch colors. In lockdown or curfew, whatever you call it, in the pandemic, I stimulate my creativity with the colors of nature. I go, when there's a sunshine, it is winter here, I rush out. I see the colors and trees and leaves and the river and so on. I feel alive, So we should not the people who are ideologists against diversity, they are dull people, dull ideologists, and they have an agenda. This we must know.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah.
They are not for peace. They are not for you. They are not for your diversity. They are not for respect of diversity. They are for their own pockets, whoever they are, if they think this way. But hopefully, thankfully, we have diverse people on earth. You are an example of this. And I say hello to my Dalit friends because they mean a lot to me. I exchange with them, I exchange with you. And I know the beauty of these people, the diversity of these people is very important to me. People of Kerala with their own blend of culture, and I feel very much Keralian when I'm in India. With your coast and your coconut trees and your good food. So let's say that poetry could be a way of interacting with the diversities of life, memory, history, narratives. It blends this all because it is basically about language. I mean, at this point, I cannot make poetry through communion. That would be maybe the ultimate stage of writing poetry. You share through communion, what you want to say. We are still we are in infancy of communication, so we still have to use language in the process. And it is universal everywhere, in every culture of the world, every people of the world, and this is very important. We have a poet. We have a poet. There is no culture on earth without a poet, which means we are in the universal basics of humanity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello. Yeah. So we maybe it's almost time now. We could conclude by I just like to raise one remark or a question, and then we could conclude this wonderful session. I think this is going to be one of the rare sessions in which we have such a great poet and a scholar disposition speaking on poetry. So my question is like you've been one of the you are like the founder of the mission of Coolitude, right? So could you name some poets who came later who do you think we should read? Like some poets who have done work similar to yours but are but are distinct in their own ways. Like poets we should the discerning reader worldwide should know from yourself. Your list of to read books. So that'll be great, and maybe we can close it after that.
we can almost call it a day. I think it was just a brilliant session. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I would mention maybe about to start with a novelist who blends poetry and novels, Amitav Ghosh. His trilogy, he read about Kulitude, we exchanged about this, brings a lot of what we have been saying, this writing history from the non-Eurocentric perspective, from the Southeast Asian perspective, from maybe Sinocentric, Indianocentric perspective, but all this mix. He wrote about indentured people from different shades and hues, mixing this polyphony of language, which is poetry to me. When you speak about polyphony, it's poly is to sing, no? Polyphonic singing. He made the languages sing with different registers of languages and speech in his book. And of course, there are poets I've read, but I could not mention names from the Caribbean, who wrote, but not directly about Kulitude, but in the spirit of Kulitude. We have visual artists who experimented with this, namely with colors. Renluka Maharaj, for example, she originated from Trinidad. Now she's in the United States. And of course, we have historians, not really poetry, but open to poetology, like Marina Carter. Maybe you know her. She's one of the best historians on migrations. We have other people, their names are not, do not come easily. But if you take the poetry book, the anthology of Kulitude, the first one, because another one is coming, we have a list of poets in French and English that we mention in the book. You will find this. It was published by Anthem University Press. The title is Kulitude. We have about 50 writers, we mentioned, talking about, let's say, the indentured people interaction, but not with an added vision of interaction between the indentured people, their culture, their languages, and other entities. You see, Kulitude comes as something new. But of course, I am in contact with a lot of people evolving, just like you, Chandramohan. This type of connecting indenture and slave songs, for example, which have been articulating for 3 decades now, because we do not have to separate our minds and memories from the pages of servitude of other people. This is where poetry is solidarity of memories, poetry and histories and narratives. We have to connect now to these pages because, when I was doing that in the fields 30 years ago, they said Torabully has gone mad. He is mad. Why is putting slave in indentured narrative? My very first book has 4 or 5 poems about the slaves and the coolies who are brothers, you see? Because this is why UNESCO contacted me earlier for their dialogues on the roots. They say, you are doing something, you must come and meet us. I met Federico Mayor, the Director General of UNESCO, some 20 years ago. And he said, keep in touch, we are very interested in your work. When they were about to classify a Pravasi Ghat, I'm coming back to that, they said, you must now disseminate Kulitude in Mauritius and abroad, so that people do not close on indenture history as history of the Hindus only. Because you have Tamils, you have Muslims, other people, Buddhists, Taoists, and believers or whatever, So I work for this diversity. And sometime before having this Le Monde, which is the second UNESCO site in Mauritius, they call it Le Monde, which is dedicated to slavery. They say, do pedagogic work. You must disseminate this connection between slavery and indenture, so that there is no competition of memories and histories in Mauritius, and it has to be an example for the whole world, because World Heritage means the world. It's not just for Mauritius. So we did this work. We are happy to do this. I'm very happy that when I connect with the people from the Dalit people, I have known other people as well. They are very much sensitive to this approach, to this Kulitude approach, where we mix narrative of histories, narrative of memories. And I am also very close to these people, as I'm close to the people when I was in Colombia. With the Kogi population, they are the first people of the earth. They are our ancestors. They are our guardians of that biodiversity and cultural diversity, and I'm totally with them. So I think also this kind of event, thank you very much for hosting it and for inviting me, is to connect our voices. This is what the voices from the Aparavasi Ghat means. We are in a third middle passage or fourth middle passage. It is a passage, transition, because the Aparavasi Ghat, also known as the Kuli Ghat in the past, was the crossroad to Kuli migrations globally. And it is a world symbol. And in it, you will find Chinese coolies talking to Indian coolies, to Congolese coolies, to coolies from France, from England, So it is a pan-indentured book. So the idea is when you address history, also address the history of the others, not because what do we have to prove nowadays? We have to prove that we are humans in this pandemic. If we are not able to understand this, my dear, then we are hopeless. What can we do with ourselves? Is it time to still fight? And because this one is dressed like this one speaks like this, so this means we have not grown up. Maybe poetry will enable us to grow. I think it is here. People will have to go to poetry. I'm invited here and again. I participated in the Medellin Poetry Festival. 1 million people online. Shared. You understand this? 1 million viewers, more than 1 million viewers. I participated. I was invited by my good friend Fernando Randon from Colombia. And everywhere now you see people writing poetry, organizing poetry meetings, readings, and so on. There's something coming up. But the mainstream media won't tell you about this because you are not fighting. You are not kill your neighbor. This makes the news sell, You are not doing this for your own pocket and stealing the ideas and visions of others to make business with it. We are not this type of people. But we are doing it. We are saying it. You can read, you can see us as we are. And I think also, when you are a poet, you have to be true with yourself and with others. You cannot cheat with poetry. When you start cheating with that, your poetry is bad. Eliot said, there is good or bad poetry. Now you define yourself. What is good poetry? What is bad poetry? As a person, you have to be a good person, good poet. This sounds maybe old-fashioned because most of the people nowadays I read online, they are, I don't know what's happening. People are becoming aggressive. Instead of sharing, they just vent your discontent. They're aggressive. So what is? People are having a lot of problems every day. Maybe they want another type of. They need poetry. This world needs poetry. So I think we have to go on writing. Chandramohan and our friend Deepak can go on, and our young friends there. I hope we can exchange. Chandramohan can give you my contact. I can read you. I would like to know you also. This is also the opportunity to continue the festival after. Through contact.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe it's like you're exhausted now. It's almost 2 hours. So thank you so much for this brilliant session.
2 hours. So thank you.
I'm on a plan to get you invited for a major session here. Yeah. Once the COVID is done, you could physically visit India. So yeah,
I would be
thanks
very
so much. Yeah,
to do
thank you so much. It was indeed a pleasure to engage with your poetry for the last 2 hours or so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. take care and keep safe, please. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
sir.